What's up, everybody? This is Morgan Gray, executive producer on Marvel's Avengers, being made at Crystal Dynamics. With me today, I have Brandon Fernandez, game director.
Howdy.
And Vince Napoli, lead combat designer.
Hello.
We're super excited to be providing a commentary track to our Golden Gate Bridge tutorial level. It takes the events of A-Day, the start of our game, and puts you, the player, in the shoes of each one of the Avengers. Now, along the way, we'll be providing some insight about how we went about building this, some of the goals that we had, and how this is all adding up to the beginning of our game and the start of our epic adventure as the Avengers.
The Avengers were everything I imagined.
One of the things that's really exciting is that this is the actual start of our game. This is where players will come into both the story and learn the tutorials and the game mechanics that start them on their adventure with each one of the Avengers. As the game goes further, they'll obviously get more in depth, but it all starts here.
You waiting? Yeah, obviously. Figured I'd let you catch up.
Our story kicks off on A-Day, where the Avengers are celebrating the opening of a new headquarters in the San Francisco Bay Area. Everything is cool until an inciting incident happens on the bridge and they go racing into action. Now, one of the fun things for us was to figure out which character we'd want the player to play first. We went back and forth tons of times. For example, in this sequence you're seeing here, originally was Cap, but for story reasons, which you'll see in a minute, we decided on Thor. And Thor is a great character to spend some time to talk about our combat systems, both for him as a hero and our heroes in general.
Tony, Thor, what's your status?
There are mortals trapped. Lots of small, angry men with guns.
So you're seeing Thor's ability to basically go from the air to the ground, back into the air sort of seamlessly. That's one of his special traits. And sort of integrate his lightning ability to sort of enhance his power attack. There's multiple ways you can use the lightning abilities. You can use it to enhance your throw and attack, your defense abilities. His combat system actually has a lot of depth when it comes to his ability to control the space and to channel his godly powers. And kind of controlling that is what's key to sort of mastering Thor's combat.
This should be fun.
Yeah, and about that throw attack, which is kind of awesome, obviously a lot of effort went into making sure that Mjolnir was equally a star in addition to Thor. So you could see there Thor's ability to throw the hammer, pin an enemy, recall the hammer, bring it back, take another enemy, send him sailing out into the bay. There's a lot of fun interplay between what Thor can do with hammer in hand and with hammer outside of his hands in terms of hand-to-hand combat, which really makes him an exciting character, sort of a modal switch in what he's capable of. We'll see some of that again when we get to Iron Man in terms of how he can become slightly different variants of himself when you're playing the game. One of the balancing acts that was very difficult for us is our heroes have a lot of depth. There's a lot of things you can do, a lot of moves that they start with, and then moves that you can unlock and sort of customize and specialize. Bringing the player into something that was visceral and adrenaline-packed, but also tutorializing them on how to play the game. For purposes of this video, we've turned off all the tutorial messages, but when you play the game, this is real gameplay. We're teaching you how to play Thor and asking you to do the very things you see in the video in front of you right now. So it's very exciting to find that perfect overlap between on-ramp to game, big cinematic experience, and really letting you feel like you're controlling all the action yourself.
Gotta admit it, that was pretty impressive.
Surprised?
Here you can see one of Thor's heroic abilities in use, which causes lightning to strike enemies nearby, supercharges all of his attacks. It really showcases his godlike behavior.
Incoming!
So at this point, the mercs that we've been facing have gotten smart. They're bringing some guys with shields, they're escalating the threat. And from a gameplay perspective, the player has learned all the basic abilities from Thor, and so now we're asking you to put them together. In this case, using a cool heroic, take out the enemies, do something more than just pound them with Mjolnir. And then we get to our first handoff, and these handoffs are going to happen through the whole level. We've gone from Thor to Iron Man. We like this great interplay between gameplay, cinematic transition, which puts us into Iron Man flight.
Convoy was hijacked this morning. This from one of Fury's morning briefs I never read?
Come on, Tony, those are important.
Iron Man was a great challenge in that, like in the films, right, he has, in a sense, mastery of the air and ground. So starting with flight, we really wanted to capture his ability to attack while on the go, as well as a more controlled air combat, which you'll see here in a moment.
Rockets are going to destabilize the bridge.
Yeah, I know.
Specifically here, we're only showcasing the repulsors, but we'll also have other gear that he can switch out to shoot on the fly.
Cap,
As well as he has some evasive maneuvers to really attack and defend himself while in flight.
We make this transition here into the Iron Man combat to see a little bit of his action on the ground. I think one of the things that I think we're all pretty happy about is just how much it's sort of seamless and how the player decides where they want to be. Like you can see we took to the hover, we're up in the air. Iron Man's about to blast out his unibeam, heroic, to take out those mercs, take a little bit out of the environment. But it's really fun just how seamlessly things link.
We'll keep you updated. And Goose is fine.
Ha! I didn't know you were listening to that part.
Yeah, I mean, with Iron Man in particular, the link between his ranged and melee was really important. We wanted his range to almost feel like an extension of his melee combat, which is very different from the other characters. In addition to that, we also wanted to make sure his range had a lot of depth. So as you see, he can switch weapons on the fly, going from the nano rocket charge rockets to repulsors to charger pulsors. We wanted to make sure his range had a ton of depth.
Yeah, and there's a lot of overlap, right, between Iron Man's in-air ground ability and Thor's in-air ground ability. I mean, the flyer class of heroes for us all sort of have that freedom of transitioning from the ground to the air, back and forth, free flying at will, really just moving around the space.
Ride, Cap?
Someone's initiated the security protocol.
So we see Widow here in the Quinjet. We're not quite going to switch to her yet, though we definitely will. But we bring in Bruce, and you know, Bruce is going to have to put on his other suit to jump down as the Hulk, where we can talk a little bit more about what Hulk brings to the combat equation, as well as how his traversal, both for him but as a concept for the heroes, really fits in for our game. So we've seen traversal through flying. Obviously, the Hulk doesn't have wings, but he certainly has the ability to leap and bound. And we make one more return into a big combat beat, but this time getting to feel what it feels like to be the Hulk in combat. So these enemies that, you know, weren't really a match for Thor by any stretch of the imagination are certainly not a match for an enraged Hulk.
I mean, Hulk is all about using the environment and using his enemies as his weapon. So you'll see here the ability to grab a single enemy, use him as an attack, grab two enemies, slam them together. Sort of a snapshot of like one of his giant skill tree options is to go down this is how you choose to weaponize, what types of enemies grab will actually change the moves. On top of that, obviously, like Morgan was saying, we have some pretty custom navigation as well.
So we wanted to really capitalize on this feeling of mass. So here we're going to look at just his wall bounding, I guess that we call it, where he really can just sink his claws, so to speak, into the world. And you see it kind of deforms it as well. That's how he can, again, use the environment to get around. But then he also has his bounding jump.
His bounding jump requires sort of that momentum gain as well, where you have to jump multiple times to kind of create the momentum through.
And he covers a lot of distance.
On my way.
You can see here he can pick up parts of the environment, use them as a weapon, as we were talking about, sort of using everything, both his own body, enemies, the world, and Hulk is just a wrecking machine. And one of the cool things about the traversal, right, is in a multiplayer context, everyone who's playing an Avenger, like, they need to keep up with each other, right? You got guys that can fly, right? Like Hulk's bounding, leaping. We'll talk a little bit about Widow as we get deeper, but we had to solve a lot of problems about how do we keep a team together when they have such a wide variety of ways they can, like, just move through the world, let alone how they fight. We're gonna get a little deeper here. You're gonna see one of Hulk's signature abilities, the thunderclap. I think we all know them from comics and cinema.
Yeah, and what's cool about Hulk's Thunderclap is that this is only the beginning, because again, we have a pretty deep progression tree. We want players to be able to kind of customize and progress and increase that, and we've pulled from a lot of the 80 years of Marvel history to figure out ways to sort of expand on a lot of these iconic abilities. It's pretty exciting for us to show kind of like how we've changed those up and progressed those.
Yeah, one of our hopes is that with each of the heroes that you have, either from the main game or beyond that you're able to come up with a sort of customization and a personalization of them that sort of makes them, you know, kind of your own version. So if you really want to invest more in like, you know, Hulk's melees versus some of his other abilities, you can make the biggest basher, or you could be like, hey, I really want to boost all my heroics and make sure those are big. Like, you know, ultimately you have a lot of choice in how every time your hero levels up, how you're structuring them.
Cap, what's going on over there?
Not sure, Nat.
One of the things that's narratively important, and again, one of the reasons why we moved Cap from the beginning of the section to this helicarrier, is the Avengers, although they're dealing with this mercenary threat, who's working from right now a still unknown boss, their leader is somewhere else. So we're kind of separating them, and that theory, you know, that concept of the heroes being separated, not working cohesively together, is actually one of the narrative threads of the game that sort of gets revisited, which is they're stronger together than they are apart. Right now, you know, Cap sort of solo-y defending the helicarrier.
All hands,
The Chimera is under attack. Evacuate the civilians.
You can see his combat moves are really celebrating the shield, his brawler abilities. We're in this combat space, which is the bridge of a helicarrier. Again, not the original space where Cap was going to fight, but made the most sense narratively. So we've been really leaning into that and giving you that sense of sort of revisiting a little bit of what you learned with Thor, but also trying to make sure you're celebrating the cool things that Cap can do here, especially that shield.
Yeah, one of the cool abilities you're about to see is charge shield throw, at which at this point he has the ability to actually kick it back and sort of do a combo follow-up based on hitting certain targets. So there's a lot more depth we wanted to get out of the shield throw between combos and multiple follow-up moves. Here you also see some of the other special things he can do with it, like counter certain attacks, and he also has an entire subset of attacks where he can use sort of shield specials, which is a very unique trait that other characters don't have.
Yeah, you
like
also
the
get
shield gong.
Shield Gong, getting a hint of that reactive environment as well, where you can send a guy into a wall, the wall explodes, doing further damage, which is cool. A bit of a preview of one of Cap's ultimate heroic abilities. And then we start this transition from Cap checking in on what's going on in the bridge.
Transporting a highly lethal sonic disruptor bomb. Our enemies intend to detonate it within the city.
So at this point, we've covered a lot of the Avengers that you expect in the game, but as you can see coming up here, this is a sneak peek for a rather young version of an Avenger that's going to be very prominent in the game, Kamala Khan. As you can see, the Terrigen mist coming out from the Terrigen reactor that's powering this helicarrier. Spoilers, Terrigen makes Inhumans. Kamala Khan's an Inhuman. It's going to be very exciting that we're tying in this sort of moment in Avengers history with the birth of Kamala Khan as a young superhero. She's going to be very prominent as the narrative picks up post this event in our game proper. We also get a cool entrance of who's been behind these mercs. What's his plan? Taskmaster shows up to reveal himself to the Avengers, which is very cool. We just keep trying to escalate the story so it feels like you're on this roller coaster. Now, obviously, we've touched, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, Cap. We spent a lot of time on building the basics of combat and how you play each of those heroes. It's Widow's turn up, and we're about to see, what she's capable of. But again, our goal was to make sure that you could play the whole team in this sequence and really feel like by the time it was done, you were every Avenger, you lived their moment, you got on the sticks with each one of them. So we start off with Widow giving chase to Taskmaster. So as we run down the bridge, there's a lot that we had to keep in mind when we were building the full sequence of this entire beginning of our game. The logistics of which Avenger would come when, what they were doing, how we'd come back to them. Obviously, with the Captain America beat, we went back to the helicarrier to see what was going on with Cap. When we returned to the bridge, we really wanted to make sure we were amplifying the destruction on the bridge. There's a lot of people that need saving. They need you, the player, and the Avengers to save them. And it was just a lot of fun to sort of script out this back and forth sequence between the Avengers and the mercenaries, and now finally the reveal, Taskmaster, of who was behind said mercenaries. We still don't quite know what Taskmaster wants yet, but we certainly know he's here, and it's time to beat him in the face a little bit before we take him up to the top of the bridge and have Widow have a bit of a duel.
I'll take this.
So as Widow rises up from this position and Taskmaster comes to face her, we're actually spending some time teaching her gun abilities to you, her evades, the timing on that, all the things that are going to be useful as her and Taskmaster continue to go head-to-head during the course of this level. It's also a bit of misnomer, right? Because when we capture this video for like the public show, we suppress so much UI that we kind of understand it's hard for people to understand what's real gameplay versus
also
cinematic.
Difficulty, right? Everything looks a little bit easier than it actually is.
One of the things that's really great about the beginning of our story on this tutorial level is like, it's primarily gameplay with cinematic transitions and a few flourishes, but it really is a great way to teach you what you need. So here we go into Widow versus Taskmaster. They've taken the fight down to the bridge from the top. We've already taught you basic combat with the other heroes. We've taught you some range. Now you can see how Widow starts trying to put it together against him, and the ways with, Taskmaster, he uses those, photoreflective reflexes to start shutting down these attacks, trying to get this escalation. This is actually one of the toughest balancing acts for us because we have a boss fight at the end of the first level of the game. We know players are just learning their heroes, just trying to figure it out, but also that boss needs to be thrilling and exciting and difficult, but not too difficult, but not too easy. It's a big balancing act for us, and as we work on finishing the game, there's going to be a lot of focus on each and every one of the boss fights to make sure we're striking the right balance of aspiration and playability.
So one interesting aspect of gameplay that is sort of on demonstration here that we haven't really talked about yet is the types of attacks and the way you counter them and defend against them. So you'll see the red flashes indicate that it can't be countered, that you need to use evade. The yellow flashes actually indicate that some perfect timing is required. So in Widow's case, she's able to perfectly counter yellow attacks with her grapple ability. But one of Taskmaster's unique traits is that as he progresses, he sort of changes the dynamic on you and sort of figures out your countering ability and changes it up. So it's kind of a cool way for us to both introduce one of the more complex mechanics the game has in a way that is true to sort of the character DNA as well.
Cool thing about Widow's grapple ability as well, it's not just a combat ability, it's actually one of her signature traversal abilities. You can use it to navigate the world.
In our more open environments, the challenge of this game is to get all the heroes together and traversing the world together, really as a team, right? So for Widow, her grapple allows her to zip through the world and keep up with an Iron Man or a Thor.
Or a Bounding Hulk.
And again, kind of mix those two things, the combat abilities and the traverse abilities together to get the player moving around the combat environment or any environment really, going in and out of melee, ranged and traversal.
Cool. I'll adapt.
Can't learn what you can't see.
You see that Widow used her cloaking heroic power. Taskmaster can't copy what he can't see. So she, goes lights out on him, gets cloaked, able to finish him off, stop this detonation of the bridge that we saw earlier, and start to try to figure out what his big idea is. Now, the irony for the Avengers in this situation is they quickly come to realize that this, kind of a distraction. There's a problem. They got separated, they got split, even though they were triumphant and saving everyone on the bridge. Ultimate victory on the scorecard is going to go to the bad guys at the start of the game. Because as the Avengers look back, check on Cap to see what's going on, they realize that there are problems in the bay. Helicarriers encasing this energy, things go south, and it's the events that start here, the sort of culpability, the sense of separation, the lack of team cohesion, and then the guilt that comes from what occurs today, the release of Terrigen, the Inhumans that get created because of it, and ultimately their own team, as you can see, Iron Man and Thor racing to Cap, and the Helicarrier going boom. That starts a ripple or sort of a rift for the team that only gets repaired when you pick up the controller and help reassemble the Avengers to ultimately fulfill both the narrative goals, but get to the bottom of why did all this happen on this day. So you literally get to play the true start of our story, and you're a part of the events that kick off the plot.
Call them murderers.
Do the Avengers pose a...
So there you go. You've gotten to see the beginning of our game, the big tutorial that kicks everything off. After that, the game really opens up. You're going to spend a lot of time with each Avenger and the missions that celebrate them, that pull into the whole greater narrative. But beyond that, you're going to be able to play with your friends in co-op and Warzone missions that really expand the world out, so 4 players working together. So there's a lot to show. We can't wait to show everyone even more of the game as we get closer to launch.
Yeah, we're excited about fans' reaction to this. It has been an absolute labor of love. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.